I remember one Christmas Eve night, when I was around 8 or 9. My family had spent the evening visiting relatives, enjoying a big meal, and exchanging gifts. It was always one of my favorite nights of the year. The house smelled like Christmas cookies, and the lights on the tree twinkled in a way that seemed to make everything feel magical. But that night, something felt different. I was having trouble sleeping, even though I was exhausted. The excitement of Christmas morning was already making me anxious. I tried to force myself to sleep, closing my eyes, but the nervous energy kept me tossing and turning. It wasn't unusual for me, even as a child, to have trouble getting to sleep. It felt like there were always too many things on my mind. Even now, as an adult, I still struggle with the same feeling of being wide awake while everyone else is asleep. But that night was different. After what felt like hours of lying there in the dark, I heard a faint noise, a scraping sound from somewhere above me. It was odd, something that didn't seem quite right. It wasn't like the usual creaks of the house settling or the wind blowing outside. No, this was something intentional, something deliberate. I tried to brush it off at first, convincing myself it was nothing. But as the sound continued, it became louder, drawing closer. It sounded like something heavy and rough being dragged across the roof, from one side of the house to the other, slowly, as if whatever was making the sound was dragging something long and cumbersome. My heart started to race. I got out of bed and cautiously stepped into the hallway. My pulse was pounding in my ears as I tiptoed down the hall to my parents' room. I knocked on their door, not caring that it was well past midnight, and they were already fast asleep. When they finally stirred and saw me standing in their doorway, clearly shaken, my dad groggily asked, "What's wrong, kiddo?" "There's something on the roof." I told them, my voice cracking with fear. I can hear it moving back and forth. I don't know what it is. My parents exchanged a tired glance before my mom spoke up. "You must have heard the wind or something," she said. "Go back to bed. Everything's fine, honey." But I knew that wasn't the case. This didn't sound like wind. "Maybe it's just Santa's sleigh," my dad joked, trying to calm me down. I wanted to believe them. I wanted to crawl back into my warm bed and tell myself I was just imagining things. But the scraping sound continued, a persistent, eerie noise that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I felt my stomach twist into knots as I stood there in the doorway, not wanting to leave, but feeling like I was going crazy. After a few more seconds of me standing there wide-eyed and anxious, my dad sighed and got out of bed. "Fine," he said. "Let's go check it out." We all trudged down the stairs together. The house was silent, except for that relentless scraping sound. My mom kept saying it was just a branch on the roof, or maybe some sort of animal. But each time I looked out the windows, I saw nothing unusual. Just the quiet, dark shadows of our yard, covered in the fresh snow that had fallen earlier that evening. By the time we got outside and went around to the backyard, the scraping had stopped. I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of unease. Something wasn't right, but there was no way to explain it. The next morning, Christmas Day, my parents were busy in the kitchen, while I ran out to see what had happened on the roof. Snow covered everything, except there was debris scattered all around our yard. Broken branches, torn bits of twigs and leaves, and patches of dirt seemed out of place. I walked cautiously around the yard, trying to make sense of it. It looked like something had fallen from the roof or had been dragged across it, but there was no sign of a tree branch breaking or any obvious damage. Just scattered debris. My parents never brought it up. They probably chalked it up to some strange accident or just something I had imagined. But I couldn't forget it. That night, the odd sounds, the feeling that something was just not right, it haunted me. Days later, something strange happened. The police came knocking on our door, asking if we had heard or seen anything unusual the night before. They explained that a man had been found a few streets over, trying to break into houses. He was armed and seemed desperate. They found him stumbling across someone's yard, covered in cuts, bruises, and deep snow from trying to sneak around the roofs to break into the homes. The officers asked if we'd noticed anything, like the noise on the roof. That's when it clicked. The man had been trying to break into our house that night. He must have been crawling across the roof, looking for an entry point, dragging a long object with him, perhaps a crowbar or a tool of some sort. We never saw the man again. He was arrested that same night, but I will never forget the fact that he had been right there, on our roof, just feet away from where I had been lying in bed. The eerie scraping sound, the debris in our yard the next morning. It all made sense now, though I still couldn't explain the weird feeling I had when it all happened. To this day, every Christmas, I feel a little extra cautious and wonder just how close we came to something far worse that night. Every year, Christmas Eve is quiet in my little apartment. I don't travel home for the holidays anymore. Family issues and tight finances make it hard to change that. So instead, I spend the night scrolling through Reddit threads, enjoying funny, heartwarming, and creepy stories. I love the spooky posts people share on Nosleep around Christmas. But this year felt different and terrifying. It started harmlessly enough. I was scrolling through my feed when a notification popped up. Someone had tagged me in a thread. My username, clear as day, with a message. "Hey Kevin, you shouldn't stay at home tonight." Confused and a little amused, I clicked on the thread. It wasn't from a subreddit I followed. The thread title was Christmas Warning. The post had just one short paragraph. "Tonight is not like other nights. Something is moving in the quiet. It looks for people who are alone. If you're reading this, it's already close. And if it knows your name, it's already too late. Pack a bag and leave now." I rolled my eyes. It was typical Nosleep content. But something about it unsettled me. My username isn't random. It's something personal, a unique choice I thought only I knew. Seeing it mentioned felt strange. I checked the user who posted it. Their account was brand new, created just a few hours ago, and had no other activity. I put down my phone and sipped my lukewarm hot chocolate. It's probably just some internet troll, I told myself. I wasn't planning to leave my apartment tonight anyway, but the uneasy feeling lingered. It was like someone was watching me, even though I knew no one else was there. Hours passed. Around midnight, I decided to close Reddit and watch a cheesy Christmas movie. As I shut my laptop, I saw something move out of the corner of my eye. A shadow passed just outside the window. My heart skipped a beat, but I told myself it was nothing. I live on the second floor. No tree branches could reach that high to cast a shadow. Then, I heard muffled footsteps in the hallway outside my door. I froze. Most of my neighbors were out of town for the holidays. Even if someone stayed behind, why would they be walking the hall at this hour? I strained my ears to listen. The footsteps stopped right outside my door. Then came a knock. It wasn't frantic, just 3 slow, deliberate taps. "Hello," I called, regretting it immediately. No answer. My phone was on the couch, out of reach unless I crossed into the line of sight of the door. I stayed still. Every instinct screamed at me to hide. But where could I go? The knock came again. Then silence. I strained to hear something, anything, but nothing followed. The hallway felt eerily quiet, like the whole building was holding its breath. When my fear eased a bit, I darted to grab my phone. A fresh Reddit notification appeared on the screen. It was a direct message. "Why didn't you answer the door?" My stomach sank. My hands shook as I opened the account. It was the same user who tagged me in the Christmas warning thread. But now their account wasn't empty. They had posted a new thread. The title, Watching Kevin. The message was brief. "They don't believe yet, but they will. The shadow moves, and it's hungry." Then I heard another sound, a faint dragging noise just outside my window. Against my better judgment, I turned to look. My blinds were half closed, but I could make out the figures of 2 men standing just beyond the glass. They were too close for comfort, and their presence felt threatening. I couldn't fully see their features, but the feeling of being watched sent a chill down my spine. I did the only thing I could think of. I grabbed my keys, shoved my feet into boots, and ran out the door. The hallway was empty, but the air felt heavy, like right before a storm. I didn't look back. My car was parked around the corner, and I've never run so fast in my life. I drove aimlessly for hours, watching the clock tick closer to dawn. Every streetlight cast unsettling shadows. Every turn of the road made me feel like I was being followed. When daylight finally came, I pulled into a diner on the far side of town. It felt safe, or at least safer. Curiosity got the better of me. I reopened Reddit. The threads and messages were gone. The account that had posted them no longer existed. But the fear hasn't left. I'm too scared to go back to my apartment. Every time I close my eyes, I see the shadow. I'm not sure they are waiting for me anymore. I think they are following me. It was Christmas Eve, and I was spending the night at my grandmother's house. She had asked me to come over and help decorate, as she wasn't as steady on her feet anymore. The past few years had taken their toll on her, and though she still had a sparkle in her eyes, I knew she didn't have the energy she once did. My grandmother's house was a place of memories, old creaky floors, the smell of cinnamon and pine needles in the air, and of course the Christmas tree. She'd insisted we use the same tree every year, the same one that had been in our family for as long as I could remember. The old thing was far from perfect. Its needles were frail, and some of the branches drooped under the weight of age, but it was hers. The decorations were a patchwork of old and new, worn glass ornaments with cracks in the sides, and tinsel that had seen better days. Every ornament had a story, some happy, some sad. They'd been passed down through generations, and I'd always thought they were the most beautiful decorations in the world, just as she did. As we decorated the tree, we fell into a familiar rhythm, me carefully hanging the ornaments and my grandmother reminiscing about the past. She smiled as she placed the star on top of the tree, her hands shaking just a little, but the smile never faltered. "Beautiful, just like always," she said, her voice soft with a mixture of joy and nostalgia. But there was something in her tone, something faintly sad that lingered. "Well, the tree looks great, Grandma," I said, hoping to lift her spirits. "I'll help you with the lights, and then we'll get some hot cocoa." Once we finished stringing the lights, we took a break, settling into the warmth of the living room. Grandma went to the kitchen to start baking some cookies, and I sank into the couch, letting the gentle hum of the Christmas music and the crackling of the fire lull me into a sense of calm. But something felt off. As I gazed over at the tree, my eyes suddenly stopped on a shadow in the corner of the room. It seemed to shift slightly, moving in sync with the dancing light from the fireplace. At first, I thought it was just my imagination, maybe the flickering of the Christmas lights playing tricks on me, or a darkened spot on the wall. But no, the shadow, it looked too solid, too deliberate. I told myself it was nothing, just the fire's warmth distorting the air. But when I looked again, the shadow hadn't moved. If anything, it seemed to be growing. Slowly, steadily. I stood up, my muscles tense, a cold shiver running down my spine. Something about it didn't feel right. I began to walk toward the tree, thinking maybe it was just my eyes playing tricks in the dim light. But the closer I got, the more distinct the shadow became. It stretched farther along the wall, slowly edging toward me, as if something, or someone, was waiting. My stomach knotted. I took another step forward, unsure if I was seeing things, or if I should call out for my grandmother. I couldn't see anything through the tree itself, but the shadow now felt as if it was right next to me, too close, but yet still invisible behind the branches. The way it loomed, barely perceptible, as though it were aware of me without my noticing it fully. This wasn't just a trick of the lighting. Suddenly, I heard the faintest rustling, almost imperceptible but clear enough for my brain to recognize. It came from the direction of the tree. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. The sound, it was as if someone, was moving through the branches of the tree. I blinked, the unease in my chest growing stronger, and as I did, I saw a single ornament on the tree tremble ever so slightly. It swayed gently as though it had been touched, though nothing had come in contact with it. The sudden shift in the ornament made my heart race even faster. A cold draft seemed to swirl around me, and I felt a tightness in my chest. Without thinking, I stepped forward again, my footfalls slow and cautious, unsure if I should approach or retreat. I didn't even know why I was so terrified. It made no sense, but everything inside me screamed that I should move away. I blinked once more, and in that instant, the shadow was gone. Just gone. The ornament stopped shaking. I stood there for a moment longer, staring at the spot where it had been. My pulse hammered in my ears. I heard Grandma humming in the kitchen, as if nothing unusual had happened. But the atmosphere around me had changed. It felt heavier, like the house was holding its breath, waiting for something I couldn't name. When Grandma returned from the kitchen, she immediately sensed something was wrong. Her eyes darted across the room, her face searching for something in my expression. Did something happen? Are you okay, dear? I snapped back to reality, trying to mask my nerves. Yeah, I'm fine, I said, though the tremor in my voice was hard to ignore. Just feeling a bit strange. But it wasn't just strange. It was terrifying, and for the rest of the evening, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong in that room. That night, I lay awake, the echoes of the tree's branches creaking in the silence of the house, the scent of pine still lingering in the air. Every time I closed my eyes, I imagined that shadow creeping from the corner of the room, that lingering presence behind the tree. I told myself it was probably nothing, just the flicker of Christmas lights messing with my mind, that's all. But somehow, it felt like it was more than that. Much more. The next morning, I awoke groggily, the memory of the previous night still gnawing at the back of my mind. I went into the living room, and that's when I saw it. A small, crumpled piece of paper wedged between the branches of the tree. A bit startled, I plucked it out and unfolded it carefully, heart racing. The words were scrawled in shaky handwriting, as if written quickly in a rush. Remember. My blood ran cold. I don't know who left that note, or why it was hidden in the tree. All I knew was that it unsettled me deeply. But as much as I wanted to find an explanation, part of me feared the answer might be one I would never want to uncover. Grandma passed away a few months later, and I visited her house to clear out some things. But I couldn't stay long. I couldn't bring myself to be there after that night. Every time I look at a Christmas tree now, I remember what happened. And every time I walk into a dark room, my mind can't help but return to the shadow in the corner, the rustling of the tree, and that piece of paper. Something from that night still lingers. It never left.